Hi there, it's Carlos again. I'm finally bringing to you my Week 11 MCS movie. In this movie, I analyzed my run from last week where I piloted Ishizu Tearlaments to a second place finish. My goal is for this analysis to exist as a master's class in playing Tearlaments. I will go over the decisions I made in technical play along the way that propelled me to success. Each round will be timestamped for your convenience, and as usual, I greatly appreciate your feedback. Before we begin, I just want to show off the deck that I played. You can see it here now. Now, I'm sure you do not need to hear me say I played 3 Rhino hard, etc, 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 as everything should be pretty self-explanatory. Minus the Ash Blossom. I'm still a big fan of Ash Blossom. Not only do I respect Max C, but I also think that the mirror match has a lot of good uses for Ash. It's just that people don't know how to use it properly. For example, you can Ash Havnis on your turn, or Collider Heart's effect to reborn himself. Moreover, Ash hits every random anti-meta deck that you will come across. The 1DD Crow is still in there as a dark for making Mud Dragon and as a versatile yet low impact hand trap. As for the side deck that I brought to Top Cut, here it is. Most of it should be pretty standard once again. Gamma is a strong and generically good hand trap. It's an out to shifter. The Rainbow Bridge package is sided in only when I'm going first, as it is rather weak going second since you're just adding more cards that lose to Dweller. Now, I do not play Evenly, as you notice, and that's because I don't think Evenly is very good in Tearlament. Here is a deck that needs its battle phase to clear the board, and trading your battle phase for your opponent's Evenly is not favorable for you. Moreover, you're still going to have to play through their Shufflers, their Havnis, their Max C, etc. Twin Twisters is my preferred back row removal, as I would much rather snipe cards like Dreaming Town in the draw phase than use mass removal and just have my opponent chain their back row to it. And lastly, Red Reboot is a spicy card both against the mirror and against anti-meta decks. Because this is such a long video, it's meant to be watched in multiple sittings, and thus I will just go ahead and do my outro now before starting the replay analyses themselves. As a reminder, you can catch me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Carlos, where I stream competitive as well as offbeat decks. You can join my Discord community and follow me on Twitter. Those links are down below in the description. I'm always happy to have a chat with viewers, so really, I welcome you. And without further ado, let's get started. In the first round, I versed EX Slayer, who was on Tearlament. Their opening hand was Scream, Snow, Merly, and 2 copies of Maxi. My opening hand is Ash Blossom, Kelbek, Scream, Imperm, and Crime. I lost a coin toss, so I'm going second. That being said, this is a fairly strong hand going second. The only thing I would like to see different is the Crime. I would much rather that be any tier name, honestly. Even a Siren or a Havnis gets me somewhere next turn. So this chain link is going to be very crucial. There's a couple of things you're going to see. My opponent made Kid Kalos. They hit 3 different shufflers, so 2 copies of Mudora, 1 copy of Keldo, and they milled a Sulliek along with a Heartbeat, so they'll be able to add back the Sulliek to their hand. And they're also going to get a search off the Sulliek. My job is going to be to get the most out of the 3 hand traps that I do have and try to turn that into as little interaction as possible. I start by going Kelbek, targeting the Kit Kalos. It's one of the dangers of activating a milling effect on the chain link before you fusion summon. My opponent chains Maxi. This will allow them to get a +1. I then chain Imperm. It's very important to chain Kelbek before you chain Imperm. This way the Kit Kalos is negated first and then gets bounced back to the extra deck. And here my opponent makes a crucial mistake. Now I can't show you the graveyard, but as I mentioned before, they had 2 copies of Mudora and a Keldo, along with Heartbeat targeting Sulliek. In that same chain, they milled a Shuffler from my own graveyard. However, there are 4 things that I need to shuffle back in this chain link. I would like to shuffle back the Sulliek, and I would also like to shuffle back both Mudoras and the Keldo. But I can't target 4 cards with 1 Keldo. However, because they preemptively use their own Mudora, I'll be able to now chain my Keldo and target the 3 things in their graveyard that are left over. At the end of the chain link, the Kit Kalos is negated and bounced back. My opponent draws into a Siren and they search a Rhino Heart off of the Sulliek. And all of a sudden, every Shuffler is out of their graveyard. They did not get to add a trap card. And the Kit Kalos is off the field. I'd say this was pretty advantageous for me. And here's one of the use cases of Ash Blossom. If you look at what's on the board right now, we know that our opponent has a Rhino Heart, it was searched. We know that they have a Siren, they just activated it. But they already normal summoned. Right now, going into my first turn, I'll be able to just attack with Kelbek into the Merly, and it turns off the Scream. Meaning that I have effectively turned this board into 0 interruptions, as long as they cannot get another tier name on board. Ash Blossom is a card that prevents your opponent from getting another tier name on board, unlike something like DD Crow. So I'm going to Ash Blossom this Siren. It doesn't feel very good, I understand, because you're trading 1 card and they're still keeping that card in hand. But a Siren in hand is worth nothing on my own turn. I top deck a Maxi, and my opponent immediately Maxis in draw phase. Top decking the Maxi is really not the worst possible thing that could have happened, but the fact that I have no playable cards really prevented me from getting further in this game, since my opponent will be able to repeat their combo again next turn, and I have no recourse for it other than my own Maxi. As I mentioned earlier, if only the crime had been a tier limit name, I could have at least done something. So I set the crime and I activate the Scream. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to put my opponent under Max C the next turn, and my hope is to draw into a Havnis to then turn on this back row. First card I draw is a planet. I would have loved to have seen that earlier. Getting rid of the Kelbek here felt unnecessary, as you're about to see that my opponent chooses to continue their combo in main phase 2. And unfortunately, they're able to set up both trap cards while maintaining the Scream, while having field presence, and it's just not going to be enough versus Perlereino, Merly, and Mudora. I believe it might have been more correct, looking back on it now, to start by normal summoning the Merly and you activating its effect along with Scream. Maybe in an attempt to bait out the crime earlier so that I could activate my own Perlereino later on in the turn. But it's entirely possible that it just would not have mattered, as I was already extremely far behind. So the game is pretty much over from this point forward. My second round was against QED Mirage, and this was also a mirror match. This time I won the coin toss, and my opponent has opened Celiac, Prosperity, Tactics, Foxytune, and Amin. I know it doesn't look like a mirror match, but you'll see that they do end up milling some tier cards. I've opened DD Crow, Keldo, Mudora, Imperm, and Celiac. So there's not much that I can do here, but there is a little something. Keldo Pitch Mudora allows me to go into a Dugaris with the use of my normal summon. And at the very least, I have a good discard in the form of Celiac, so I know that for a fact, if this Dugaris resolves, I'll be able to get into Engine. I draw into a Rhinoheart and a Havnis. There's a few choices here. You can either discard the Havnis, the Rhinoheart, or the Celiac. Discarding the Rhinoheart is the one that's most resilient to interruptions. Because if, for example, this Rhinoheart gets DD Crowed, I will still have Havnis Celiac for my opponent's turn. Now I make Kid Kalos, and in that same chain link, I also send a Merly with Rhinoheart. This allows me to search for a copy of Scream, and then I can use Kid Kalos' effect to reborn the Merly in the graveyard. I'm able to trigger a new fusion, as well as Scream, and as well as a Siren. Wait, shoot. I'm able to trigger a new fusion, Scream, and Crime targeting the Rhinoheart that's banished. Then I also use my own Keldo to shuffle back that Scream so that I could add it with... Then I use my own Keldo to shuffle back that Crime so that I can add it with my own Keldo. Then I use a Keldo, as I have milled an abundance of shufflers, in order to shuffle back that Crime so that I could add it with the Scream that activated in this chain link. This allows me to end on Rukalos and Elf with Suliak, Crime, Inperm, Aditi Crow, and the monster to send for Crime. As I mentioned, there were going to be some tier cards revealed. I play out this turn pretty sloppy. The thing is that when you're so far ahead and you've set up all of these interruptions, a searchable counter trap, Suliak, Imperm, Rukalos, Elf, Scream, you can kind of afford to be a little loose with your interactions. That said, activating Scream here was honestly a mistake. I should have just impermed the Wagon and called it a day. There was no reason to do anything else. Because of how sloppy I played out my opponent's turn, I have to play things a little unorthodox in order to get the OTK, but it's still very possible by linking off the Maxi and the Kaleido for a Dark, and then using Kit's effect to reborn the Kaleido. My round 4 game versus Mephisto, who is also on Tearlament, is one of my favorite games of this entire tournament. It is a masterclass in playing around Havnis, and I hope that you will appreciate it as much as I do. Also, Mephisto and I happen to be mutual friends on a Discord server, so I'm really sorry I had to do this to you, but tournament's a tournament, you know? So Mephisto has opened up Crime, Imperm, Keldo, and Havnis. Essentially a brick. But at least they do have Havnis. I opened Maxi, Rhino, Keldo, Agito, and Scream. Now I did lose the coin toss, so I am going second. And the first thing I have to think about is, should I use Maxi in draw phase, or should I wait until my opponent procs it? With this hand, I already have all of the gas I need to play on my next turn. So I actually don't mind if I Maxi in draw phase and my opponent just sets back row and passes, because I know I'll be able to play. However, this hand is very susceptible to talents. Talents looking at my hand and ripping apart the Rhino would mean that I suddenly have to play the mill game with Keldo and Agito. So for this reason, I'm going to shotgun the Maxi. I don't always shotgun the Maxi though. Mephisto sets Crime, double Imperm, and passes. They were always going to do this anyway, so the max C didn't really matter. But as I mentioned, I did not want to play into talents with this particular hand. Drawing Terraforming is what really enables this entire line. I choose not to have my opponent mill. Sometimes you do want to make your opponent mill when you're playing the mirror match. But I am already so far ahead of my opponent. They just passed on their first turn. So there is no reason for me to mill and open up their graveyard into having additional plays. By making Kit here, I can activate Kit as Chainlink 1 and then use Planet as Chainlink 2. So that's already one way that I've dodged Havnis. The middle column is always Imperm, so never target the middle column with Planet. Okay? They're always just gonna chain it. I saved the Scream until this point because I knew that no matter what, if any of my other plays were interrupted, I always had normal summon Rhino. So there was really no reason for me to use Scream any earlier. And because I held on to it this long, it means that now Mephisto cannot chain Havnis to my Rhino Heart. I'm able to make a Mud Dragon, no effect is triggered on field, and if you do the math, this is just above 8,000 damage, all without ever triggering Havnis. My round 6 game was against Marshmallow, who was also on the mirror, and this replay is going to show you exactly just how far one Havnis can get you. So I won the die roll, and I've opened Ash, Havnis, Rhino, Agito, and Imperm. Marshmallow has opened Imperm, Mudora, Maxi, and 2 copies of DD Crow. It's a fairly strong hand going second, but it does severely lack engine. My only play is to normal summon Rhino Heart. And people said Ash is bad. My first fusion attempt is meant with a DD Crow. But the DD Crow does trigger my Agito, so I'm able to still make a rank 4 play. Now there's a few choices I had here. Well, 2 choices really. It was either Redoer or Dugaris. Each one kind of loses to its own thing. Redoer loses more heavily to a second DD Crow, and while Dugaris does lose to Imperm, at the very least I won't skip my draw phase if it gets Impermed. So I make Dugaris instead. Plus I have good discards, and I have a lot of good draws in my deck. Unfortunately, it does get Impermed. My opponent has traded 3 hand traps and completely stopped me. I end on only an Imperm and a Havnis. And a Dream. Marshmallow opens Snow and chooses to normal summon the Snow. They could have chosen to normal summon the Mudora instead, and then you have a shuffler on field for use on my turn. But I can stand by the reason of leaving the Mudora in hand, as it does make your top decks better. Leaving Mudora in hand means that top decking any Ishizu becomes playable. Whereas if you normal summon the Mudora, top decking any Ishizu is not playable. And here they make the biggest mistake they possibly could have, and activate Snow. What's the worst that can happen, right? I hit a Havnis and a Siren. I know that my opponent is on DD Crow. They've showed it. And frankly, I want to play around it. So I activate both names. If they don't DD Crow, I'll just fuse with both of the names I activated at once and just make Kid Kalos. Then if my next fusion attempt gets met with DD Crow, which it does, at the very least, I have field presence and follow-up for next turn. And I know that my opponent is going to have one card in hand after this DD Crow. Since they already normal summoned, there is nothing that one card can be that plays around Imperm. Unless it's instant fusion, but that won't happen until later. I normal summoned the Mudora that I drew for turn first, as it's very possible that my opponent has their own Havnis, and if they do, then I want to make sure I have a shuffler available for whatever they could possibly hit off the mills. Then, after that, I'll use Kit to reborn the Rhino that I milled earlier off Havnis. And from here forward, the OTK becomes trivial. Now, eat my own words and I actually end up being 400 damage short. But at least I have access to a rank 4 play and my opponent has one card. I choose to make Trident here. I think most people would have probably made Dweller, and Dweller would have been just as fine. Theoretically, Dweller only loses to evenly matched and Rhino Heart, or evenly matched and Instant Fusion, and even that isn't really a total loss, as I'm still going to have a Shuffler in the graveyard, and my opponent is still under Dweller. But Trident is the more resilient play, so I made Trident. And I'm so far ahead, I even forget to use Trident to pop my own Kaleido Heart and set up even another fusion. My round 7 game was against Ian, who was playing an Adamancipator Tearlament Earth Pile with 60 cards. It was a bit of an unfortunate game, but there's a couple of points of interaction that I want to highlight. So I've lost a coin toss. Ian is going first. They've opened Crossout in 60 cards, Agido, Koakimeru Guardian, and the Vernasil Duck. I don't know what it's called. I have opened a very unfortunate hand of Ash Blossom, 2 copies of Siren, and 2 copies of Rhino Heart. Don't worry, I played poker after the tournament. Starting with a normal summon Guardian is already pretty threatening, as it means they have an answer to my Ash Blossom off the bat. But because they activated a Guido, all of a sudden I can start playing. I'm able to activate Havnis and Sulik, so I can chain block my Havnis from the Guardian. And then Ian activates a Guido. I also hit a Shuffler, so the mills there were Havnis, a Shuffler, and Sulik. I use a Shuffler here, fully expecting it to get negated by Guardian, because I want to take the Fairy out of Ian's graveyard so that a Guido doesn't convert into 2 bodies. And I also want to take out as many rocks as possible so that in case they have Block Dragon in hand, they won't be able to get any use out of it. I then add a Havnis with the Sulik in hopes of getting some additional interaction. And I fuse with 2 cards in my hand in order to make Kaleidoheart right off the bat to challenge the Guardian. My hope is that they will trigger the Guardian, but they don't fall for that. Here they make Gallant Granite, and I was always expecting this play to happen, but I felt pretty confident because I had an Ash Blossom for it. Another reason why I really like Ash Blossom. It's just good into a variety of different decks and strategies. But unfortunately, Ian has managed to have access to the 1-of in a 60-card deck. Couldn't do much against that. By shuffling back the rocks earlier, I played around having Block Dragon in hand, and by holding the Ash for Gallant Granite, I played around them being able to search the Block Dragon, but I couldn't play around all of that and Crossout. So this was going to get them access to Block Dragon, and from here on out, I'm a sitting duck. You might even say I'm a sitting Vernisylph duck. I finally get to trigger Havnis, but unfortunately I do not mill anything relevant. If anything, milling a copy of Maxi made it easier for my opponent, as now their Asa has an Earth target. And with top decking a Mudora here, versing a 3-mat Appaloosa, Dweller, and Shengying, along with Ian's own Mudora in the graveyard to trigger the Shengying, there wasn't really much that I could do. I couldn't threaten any of the cards on the field. I believe at this point, there was an argument to be had for going into battle right away, challenging the Dweller with Kaleidoheart, and maybe seeing if Ian uses the Mudora to banish the Kaleidoheart preemptively, then normal summoning Mudora in main phase 2 to pull off a Zeus line. But even that, it's still just... But even that still leaves me so far behind. and it requires Ian to make the misplay of using his Cheng Ying preemptively. In this situation, it is definitely more correct to use the Cheng Ying against a level 4, as there is nothing that my deck can really do under Dweller other than make rank 4 plays. In round 8, I played versus JSR, and it is once again a mirror match. Taking a look at the opening hands, JSR has opened Imperm, Scream, Havnis, Siren, and Maxi. Fairly strong hand. I have opened Merly, Ash Blossom, Agido, Imperm, and Siren. Also a fairly strong hand. And it's going to show, once again, one of the reasons why I really love Ash Blossom. While it's true that Kid Kalos Sulliek is an end board, it's not the best end board you can make. Why settle for Kid Kalos and Sulliek when you can just put your opponent under Dweller? I pitched a Merly from my hand as I want to leave the Agido in there in case I either want to use it for extension, if I needed to make my opponent mill, or if I want to just normal summon it to have access to a rank 4 play. So because I mill a fairy, I go ahead and trigger the Agido here. The Kid Kalos is met with an Imperm, and before that, JSR chains Havnis. Fairly strong. I do not have any shufflers for their mills, and so this Havnis is going to get very far. The Kaleido shuffles back my Kid Kalos, a smart choice, as being able to overlay into Trident would have allowed me to pop it anyway, despite the fact it got impermed. So I choose to go into the Dagaris to draw here. And I draw into Sulliek and Rhinoheart. I haven't normal summoned yet, so the Rhinoheart will allow me to keep playing. And the Sulliek is going to give me an extra interruption on my opponent's turn. For this reason, I actually choose to discard the Imperm. The Rhinoheart trades with the Shuffler that JSR milled earlier, but because I've only fused with Merly and Havnis, I'm able to overlay the Siren and the Rhinoheart for Redoer and fuse for the third time. Now this does play really hard into Crow, but frankly, they could also top deck into a Crow. So might as well just do it now. There's no additional value that I can get off this Kid Kalos since I do not have any tier limit names engraved, so I set Sulliek and pass. Now, I immediately negate the Rhino Heart in draw phase, as I would rather not play into talents if I don't have to. And frankly, this Kaleido Heart is going to be able to put in a lot of work should my opponent start to mill Aquas. And I need to mill something quickly so that I could hopefully have shufflers and interactions in the graveyard to stop them any further. I'm able to hit a Fuser, Sulliek, and Scream. So I can add a Havnis back to my hand, and I can fuse to have an additional interruption. I did not have the ability to make Kaleido Heart here, so I just made Rule Kalos with the kit from earlier. At the very least, this will allow me to give play against the instant fusion that my opponent has just drawn. Now, I choose not to use Redoer's effect in the standby phase, and I get this question a lot of why I do not do this. The Ishizu Tearlaments cookie cutter build plays around 8 spells and 6 traps. Your odds of hitting one of those cards is extremely low. You have a much higher chance of hitting one of your opponent's Tearlament names, one of your opponent's Shufflers, your opponent's Fairy Tale Snow. You have a much higher chance of hitting cards that your opponent wants to go to their graveyard as opposed to cards that will get you value. I typically never use Redoer in the opener. I typically never use Redoer in the mirror unless I have a very good reason to do so. And typically that's using it on my own turn should the Redoer live for that long, as that way I have access to a Zeus play with enough materials for 1 board wipe. So because I hit a Shuffler earlier off of my Kit Mills, I'm able to have an answer to my opponent's Scream Mills. So as I mentioned, here I do choose to use Redoer, and my draw phase is skipped because of Dugaris. But after deliberating on it, I actually choose to link both of these off into a Dark, and essentially pray that my opponent doesn't hit anything off Scream. Given the contents of my hand, this was really the only play that I had. Sometimes you have to take a gamble like that in the mirror. So they do hit a Fuser, and they elect to make hit Kalos. Now my plan was to link off for Dark, hope that my opponent doesn't mill anything relevant, go into battle phase, crash the Dark into Kaleido Heart, and search Siren to then play on main phase 2. But because they chose to fuse into Kid Kalos, I now have a window of opportunity to use Havnis, and this allows me to play in main phase 1. I can use the Sulliek to negate the Kid Kalos, a little late, but it does allow me to send the Havnis on field in order to ensure I can get a fusion. Now, because my opponent has Mud Dragon, I cannot use Kit to target either the Dark or herself, but I have not normaled yet, so I can simply add a Rhino Heart and normal summon it. However, because I do not have any Dark monsters in my graveyard that aren't Aquas or Tearlaments, The only thing that I can really do from this position is fuse off into Kaleido, out my opponent's Scream, and then beat over their Mud Dragon. This does give me play on their turn though, since I do still have Sulliek, and the Kit and the Kaleido are both permanently negated and Scream is off the field. My opponent trades Kaleido Hearts with me, and then they beat over the Dark. Dark is going to allow me to get a search, and that's going to allow me to then continue playing next turn. And at this point, time was actually called, and I was up in life. And the truth is that time was actually called much earlier during my own turn, and I was up in life. So I had already been declared the winner of this match. We were simply playing it out for a little bit longer. Now, this is actually the first time that I've ever gone into end of match procedures in the MCS. And it is also the first time that I've felt compelled to make a judge call for slow playing. The fact of the matter is that the slow play was hurting my opponent more than it was hurting me. Because had they played at a more reasonable pace, it's entirely possible that they could have won the game in the end, or at the very least been up in life. Now we will go over the replays from the top cut, and I'm going to start with the round 16. I versed Victory Star, who was playing Flunderies. Victory Star won the coin toss, and their opening hand is Pot of Duality, Dai-Fi, Harpies, Raigeki, and M-Pen. I've opened Maxi, Ash Blossom, Kelbek, Terraforming, and Planet. Effectively a 3-card hand versus Flunderies, but considering what Victory Star has opened, they're a fairly strong 3 cards. So I'm not sure why Victory Star didn't start their turn with activating Dai-Fi. It plays around the Droll, which, despite the fact that Droll is not in the format, if it's completely free to play around the hand trap, you might as well play around it. Then they proceed to activate Advent, banishing M-Pen. And I hate to tell you, but you ended up versing the only tier player who still has Ash in their main deck. So, Ash Blossom? Response? They pass turn and we draw Havnis. This is perfect. It's exactly what we needed. A tier name to allow us to fuse. And you'll see why in a second. Planet searches Siren. With Siren, we'll pitch the Maxi. Because a card was not sent to the graveyard, we do not have to mill 3 cards, and therefore 3 cards do not get banished. Normal the Kelbek and make Redoer. Something to note about Dai-Fi is it says all monsters sent to the graveyard are banished instead. Cards that are Exceeds materials are not monsters. They are Exceeds materials, so they do not get sent to the banish zone under Dai-Fi. This means that our Siren underneath of Redoer will trigger. And because we top deck the second tier name, we're able to make a Kit Kalos and pop the Dai-Fi using our Planet. From this point forward, I'm trying to end the game by searching a Rhino Heart and trying to get 2 more fusions. It doesn't work out that way, but I'm still able to apply a lot of pressure. I set the terraforming as a bluff. It wasn't really necessary. Redoer hits unevenly matched. And the 2 board breakers in Victory Star's hand will be able to trade for the board. However, the Rhino has an available tier card to send, and I'm just able to make Dragostapelia all over again. I make Mud Dragon first with the Havnis. Then with the card that I send off Rhino, I'll make Kid Kalos. And then with the Kit Kalos search, I'll get my 3rd fusion and make the Mud Dragon into a Dragostapelia. The reason I do this is that if the last card in hand is evenly matched, I can just banish the Dragostapelia, start my next turn off with a Kit Kalos, and I have a Rhino Heart in graveyard ready to activate Kit Kalos, and then I know that I win from that position. But the last card was a little bird, which just the same loses to the Dragostapelia. Moving on to Game 2 versus Victory Star. They have opened Town, Macro, N-Pen, Ryza, and Avian. Not the hand you want to see, but it's Flunderies. I've opened up Ash Blossom, Agido, Scream, Red Reboot, and Sulliek. So I'm feeling pretty confident with this hand, but I don't have a way to engine yet. That's the only downside. Star just sets macro and passes. And while I could normal summon a fairy of my own just to put some pressure on the board, keeping fairies in my hand opens up my top decks to either Keldos, Mudoras, Sirens, etc. So I choose to just set Sulliek and pass. And I feel pretty confident that with my Ash Blossom, because Victory Star did not make a play last turn, they likely won't be able to make a play next turn as well. I know that Terraforming is the only playable card in their hand, as I mentioned, and an Ash Blossom ends that. Now I top deck Planet, and now we can get to the races. So I know that I'm going to be making Zeus, but I make Drident first, and I attack with Drident. Make sure you do not destroy the Macrocosmos in battle phase, as that opens you up for an evenly matched. Instead, I destroy the Macrocosmos with Drident in main phase 2, and then overlay into Zeus. Eaglin is not the top deck that will allow them to play this turn, And in the end phase, I can clear the field with Zeus, being unafraid of the set back row, and I can search a starter with my Sulliek. Rhino and Scream should mean getting to game is trivial. I use that Mudora just to add back Sulliek to my hand, in case something should go wrong. Next, we have the top 8 match versus our YCS Niagara 2022 champion, Raymond Dai. And I finally get my run back from week 8 in the MCS. So I'm fortunate enough to win this coin toss, and it does matter. Ray has opened up double Sulliek, Scream, Foolish Burial Goods, and Kelbek. Whereas I've opened up DD Crow, Rhino Heart, Agido, Sulliek, and Crime. My hand will always start with normal summon Rhino here. You tend to want to send Merly off Rhino when you're making these plays. We don't have access to Sprined yet in Master Duel, so there's really no dedicated priority system to what order you want to do your fusions in. But because you're going to search a Merly from your deck and then special it with Kit, that means you have one less Merly in your deck to mill. So getting your first fusion off with Merly means you have a higher chance of hitting the other tier names that are still in your deck. I'm still testing for a possible Havnis, so I do use Kit Kalos as Chainlink too. There are situations where you would want to hold your Havnis. I'm able to search one more Scream with my mills, and I also do hit one Shuffler as well as Snow, but I can't do much more than that. And we'll just have to settle for Rule Kalos, Crime, Sulliek. It's not the strongest end board, but it'll have to do. So Ray normal summons Havnis and activates Scream, hitting a Rhino Heart and a Keldo. Not bad, but it's basically just going to trade with our own Shuffler. Ray sets 2 cards and passes. I top deck an Imperm. Now, because I do not have the advantage of Scream, I'm going to choose to go into battle right away and try to remove the tier name from Ray's field as soon as I can. On attack declaration, Ray activates Sulliek, targeting my Rule Kalos. I chain my Sulliek, targeting his Havnis, and then he chains Crime to negate my Sulliek. I could have used my Crime here to negate his Crime, but I felt pretty confident in that whatever he sends off his hand could just DD Crow. I was not expecting the Kelbek, though. And so here I was particularly concerned if Ray was able to activate Havnis and Kelbek, as then I would have been in serious trouble. But because Ray only activates Kelbek, I know that the last card in his hand is not a tier name, and I'm able to just crime the Miller, and from that point establish control of the game. I said my own Nagito, but I choose not to activate it. I already am ahead in this game, and I don't want to give Ray any mills, which can open up his plays for next turn. I normal summoned a DD Crow just to make an elf to apply some pressure next turn. And the mills off that Merly gift me with another shuffler. I set the Imperm in the same column as Scream, as this is a very scary card. And I set the Sulliek so that I have a counter for Ray Sulliek. Ray top decks Max C, which is very unfortunate. That being said, even if Ray had top decked a Rhino Heart here, my Imperm would have been able to negate the Scream as well as the Rhino Heart. Ray could have then chained his Sulliek to target my Elf or my Merly, but then I could have chained my own Sulliek to get rid of that and still negate the Scream in the process, send one of my cards to continue playing. Basically, I was always winning from this position. The only top deck that could have been obnoxious would have been something like an Instant Fusion. Moving on to game 2 versus Ray, he has elected to go first, and he's opened up Tactics, Called By, Terraforming, Mudora, and Havnis. That's a fairly strong hand. I've opened up 2 copies of Maxi, Rhino Heart, Reboot, and Imperm. With this particular hand, I am going to choose to shotgun the Maxi. I really can't afford to have Ray look at my hand, as I only have 1 playable card. But because I have Red Reboot, and because I have Maxi, I'm not feeling too inconfident. But because I have Red Reboot, and because I have Maxi, I am feeling confident in my ability to play next turn. Of course, the Maxi was moot, as Ray does have the call by. But you know what? We played around talents, and that matters. The Siren is able to send the Havnis in hand, and it hits a Scream. Scary, but we do have Red Reboot. Kid is met with an Imperm. And Ray sets Crime and passes. I believe the choice to search Crime here was because it is a guaranteed way to get the Shuffler out of his graveyard, which will turn the counter trap into then an additional interruption. Having the Maxi here is pretty nice, as it does mean that I'll be able to not worry about Havnis or Maxi this turn. We get crimed, and we chain Red Reboot. And from here, our goal is to try to out as much of the board as possible, but it's going to be mill dependent, since we don't have any engine left there in our hand. I need to hit 1 fusion here, as because of Planet, there is no way for me to attack over Kit Kalos without hitting another fusion. So it's risky, but the mill 8 does reward me with a Rule Kalos. And I'm also able to get a Mudora in my graveyard. Once again, I dropped the Max C in the draw phase. I'm doing this because at this point, I have established control of the game. I've played around talents in the previous turn, so there's no reason for me to play into talents this turn. And I know that at the very least, I can normal summon the Ash Blossom in my hand, make Elf, and have a play for next turn, even if Ray should pass. Ray starts by normal summoning Mudora, likely to not give me a draw off the Maxi, as he could have gone Mudora, pitch Mudora. And he elects to shuffle back, Scream, my Mudora, and his Rhino. This triggers Planet. I originally thought that Ray was going to target his Sulliek to then search a playable card and continue playing. The downside with that play is that he is under Max C. The only playable card you can search would be Siren, and you'd be giving me draws and be at the mercy of mills at that point. So instead he chooses to bait me and targets the Rule Kalos. That way, if I trigger Rule Kalos to reborn itself, I get punished by talents. Now, I thought about this for a little bit before making the decision not to activate Rule Kalos. As I mentioned earlier, I've been playing around tactics this whole time, and I have no reason to start now. Without any tier names on field, then I can simply normal summon the Ash Blossom, make Elf, and continue playing. Because Ray targeted my Rule Kalos, I strongly feel that he has talents, which means that if I don't play into it, there's no play left that he can make, unless the two cards are exactly Instant Fusion and Tactics. But I take my chances playing around the one of, and I'm rewarded for it. Ray is not able to ever use the talents in his hand, and the Mudora is sitting in his hand completely dead, as are the back row. A Mudora there is one of the best draws in our deck, as it's a fantastic normal to get into Elf. However, because Ray did not shuffle back the Kid Kalos in his graveyard earlier, I can just make Dark and take that instead. And this was another reason why I did not do the Tactics play earlier. Even if I did not top deck that Mudora, I could have still just normal summoned the Ash Blossom and made that Dark anyway. In other words, as soon as I saw that Ray did not target the Kid Kalos with his Mudora, I knew that my play was to not walk into Talons, since it ensured that that last card in his hand was clearly not Instant Fusion. And I'll just let the rest of the OTK line speak for itself. Send Merly. Make my own kit. Use kit to reborn Rule. Kit mills 5, hits another fuser. Make Kaleido, and I have the whole family on board. GG's, Ray. It really was a hell of a game, and playing against you is always a pleasure. Next, we'll be looking at my top 4 game versus Justinian, also playing Tearlament. This time I lost the coin toss. Justinian is going first. They've opened up Imperm, Talents, FBG, Double Merly. I've opened up Ash Blossom, Kelbek, Terraforming, Scream, and Imperm. A fairly strong hand for going second. Because Justinian starts with normal summon Merly, it's a fairly weak play, and for that reason, I'm going to choose to fire off the Imperm right away. FBG allows Justinian to search for Siren by dumping Sulliek. And here I decide that if I Ash Blossom the Siren, I can completely stop the rest of the turn, and I get punished exclusively by talents. But at some point in time, I'm going to have to use the rest of the hand traps, as Siren pitching a name is going to go very far. So from that point forward, I decide I need to just suck it up and play into talents. Ray rips the best card out of my hand, Terraforming, and I'm left trying to top deck something. They also set an Imperm in the middle column. I was deadly convinced that this was a Sulliek, and so you're going to see me do something very foolish later. I knew perfectly well what I was doing, but I did it only because I was so sure that it was Sulliek, and I just kind of wanted to assert a little dominance. Fortunately for me, I opened up Keldo. That was the best card to have opened, aside from a tier name to go along with the Scream. At the very least, it'll open up my hand, and it will get me a Shuffler on board, as well as another monster in hand. But we are going to have to gamble. It's time to get it twisted. I search a Guido with the Kelbek, as this will convert into 2 additional level 4 bodies. Taking a look at the mills, Justinian hit an FBG, Imperm, Scream, Imperm again, and Sulliek. So not the best, but the Sulliek will give them a Havnis, and that will allow them to have another play on my turn. I've hit a Sulliek, a Scream, and a Rhino Heart. So solid mills on my part. So what I do here is I sequence my chain links in such a way that the Rhino that I fused with will send the Merly to the graveyard, and then I never have to activate Kit Kalos to play into a Havnis. You see, if I do it this way, I already have Sulliek and Scream in hand, and I already have a tier monster in my graveyard to summon off of it. So while I can activate Kit to get some value off of it, Havnis is the last play that Justinian has that I'm aware of. And by just not activating Kit, I can give up 1 card and play around that. Because then my next play can be to make Dweller with these 2 of these level 4s, and suddenly I care a whole lot less about Justinian's Havnis. So I like to go into battle first, as I've said, I am dead sure that that is a Sulliek. So I activate the Scream in the Imperm column because, again, I am just so overconfident that that is a Sulliek. The Mill 11 rewards me with an additional fusion and a Shuffler. As well as a Mill 5, which does not convert into anything relevant, but it does put even more Shufflers in my graveyard. And Justinian hits nothing relevant. I'm now able to fusion into Rokalos. Fire off the Dweller right away. I do not have to fear an Imperm as my Dweller is under Elf. I do not negate the Havnis with Rukalos. From this position, the only thing that I am scared of is a rank 4 play. Havnis is not a rank 4 play. I'm perfectly fine with a Havnis hitting the field. And that's game 1. Now for game 2, Justinian has opened up Imperm, Scream, FBG, and Double Rhino. And I've opened up the most Roar Kalos hand of all time. 3 copies of Maxi, DD Crow, and Rhino. I shotgun the Maxi again. I always shotgun Maxi if I really do not want to play into talents. This hand only has 1 starter, so I really cannot afford to have Justinian looking at my hand. Justinian is still able to do a lot with that hand and ends with Planet, Kid Kalos, Scream, Imperm, and Sulliek. Now, fortunately, the Maxi did draw me into a red reboot, so I have an answer for the traps. What I don't have is an answer for Planet or an answer for Scream. I draw a Keldo here, and I start my play by targeting the Mudora in Justinian's graveyard. My only play loses to a Shuffler, and so I'm just going to use DD Crow to snipe that Shuffler out of the way now. In retrospect, it might have been a good idea to go into... Cut that. If you're wondering why I'm doing this in draw phase, it's because I want Justinian to feel safe that he can activate this Mudora without walking into a Talents. While activating this Mudora doesn't accomplish anything, it does mean that later on, when he does mill, he'll have one less card that he'll have one less good mill. At this point, hitting a Mudora for the rest of this turn does nothing. However, had I waited until main phase 1, Justinian might have been less inclined to activate this Mudora and just let it get banished. And then that means he would have had additional live mills. So I begin my play with normal summon Rhinoheart, Justinian chains Scream, then chains Sulliek, and that was always going to be met with a red reboot. As I mentioned though, Scream is still a scary card. Justinian hits a Mudora, which as I mentioned is completely dead because he used one earlier, a Scream, and a Maxi. The Scream gets him another trap card, and I'm able to fuse into Kid Kalos. Now this Kid Kalos walks into a Havnis, and I use my own Maxi to apply some pressure to get Justinian to lay off some of the fusions. I see that Justinian hits a Merly, which is a fusion. And here I make a very crucial mistake. Looking at my hand, I assumed that my next round of play could be to just activate Kit, special summon the Merly that I add, mill 8, and maybe start to combo from there. However, it's going to be really difficult to OTK this turn through both Scream and Planet. Moreover, if I don't clear out all of these trap cards this turn, I'm most likely going to lose next turn. The best play I have is to make a Zeus, and the only way I can do that is by having access to rank 4s. It was actually a much better idea to add Siren here. I did not see the line at the time because I did not have another way of getting a level 4 onto the field aside from that Siren. But you'll see why I get punished. Another line that I didn't see was Justinian shuffling with Rhino Heart, or another line that I didn't see is Justinian fusing with Rhino Heart in hand. That's going to allow him to make Kaleido Heart and shuffle back my Kid Kalos, effectively meaning this Merly in my hand is dead. Moreover, I draw Mudora off the max C draw, and this would have completely given me free reins for a rank 4 play if only I had searched Siren. At that point, I could have made Zeus and Dweller, wiped the whole field, and despite the fact that Justinian would have cards in hand to play, they would have to play their next turn through max C while I'm sitting on a Zeus. The Kit Kalos mill doesn't hit anything relevant except one shuffler, but as I mentioned, I have shufflers here. I would have been able to shuffle that back before doing anything else. And from this position, I lose the game. Now for the last game of the top 4 match. Justinian has opened Imperm, Planet, Rhino, Merly, and DD Crow. Fairly strong hand. I've opened up Havnis, Siren, Rhino, Mudora, and Tactics. Also a fairly strong hand. It's good going first, as I have ample engine to play with and a talent to punish my opponent's hand traps. I always start my play here by normal summoning Rhino. It's how I like to start my plays in Master Duel, as it does the best job at playing around Maxi. My Rhino gets Impermed here, which is fairly aggressive. I would have elected to just let the Rhino fuse and then Imperm the Kit, as that shuts me off from making an easy rank 4 play. But I can understand that the punish here would be something like a Mass Change Second, which has been known to be popular in the meta. That said, I'm able to continue playing with Siren. I make Redoer here, kind of half expecting the DD Crow, but at least if I get DD Crowed, my talents is finally turned on. And my Siren also hits a Snow, which, as we'll see, is going to come in handy. So as I predicted, my Redoer play is met with a DD Crow and I'm able to activate talents. Now I have the talents to draw here because otherwise I just don't have a play aside from Havnis. And I draw the turtle and another talents. So once again, I have no interruptions left aside from one shuffler, a Havnis, and a dream. I do not fire the Redoer in standby phase on my opponent's turn. I don't want to give them easy access to a card off the top of their deck. Once Planet is activated, I'm convinced that I lose this game 100%. But we keep going and we try our best and we play with the cards that we have. The first attempt to fuse is met with the Mudora in my graveyard. And I also choose to shuffle back all of Justinian's DD Crows as I don't want them getting easy access to Mud Dragon to put me on their Dweller. I expected the Planet here to pop Siren, but because Justinian has a Rhino Heart, then it's pretty safe to pop the Redoer. Here, I can at least trigger Havnis. But I hit 2 of the Shuffler that I already used and a Rhino Heart that cannot activate its effect because I do not have any tier cards in my hand. Things are starting to look very bleak for me. Especially as Justinian is able to fuse into Kit Kalos, and the Kit Kalos searches a Merly. I make a desperate play here. And despite the fact that I only have 9 cards in my graveyard, I activate Snow. I do this play to book the Kit Kalos, which will stop it from extending this turn. The Merly that was just added is unusable because Justinian has already normal summoned. The Sullia can also not do anything. And whatever the last card in hand is, I just have to pray that it isn't a power card. For Snow, I've chosen to banish a Mudora, a Rhino, the Turtle, DD Crow, FBG, Talents, Redoer, and that's it. Looking back on it, banishing the Turtle from the hand was definitely a mistake. I turned off possible Siren top decks from being playable, but I just wanted to keep a tier name in my graveyard just in case. If you're in this position, keep the Turtle in your hand. You want to have the monster in case you top deck a Siren. Justinian elects to beat over the Snow. There's different lines of thinking here. If you beat over the Havnis, you cut me off from a dark play. And since you have a Kit Kalos in defense position, it's very possible that I'll be able to beat over it, make dark, and reborn it. But if you beat over Havnis instead, you leave me open for a rank 4 play. So just different lines of thinking there. Terraforming was the best top deck I could have hoped for. I know that my Rhino Heart is going to be met with Sulliek, and I have a Shuffler for whatever Kit Kalos mills. I know that Justinian has a Planet Pop when I do inevitably shuffle back his Fuser, but he's going to have to choose between one of my 2 monsters and Planet. No matter what he chooses, I will still be able to make a play because I have talents and I can take this Siren. And because I did not shuffle back Justinian's Kit Kalos, I can go dark and take it. Now, there's no point in searching anything with the Kit Kalos because I already normal summoned and I'm not going to activate this Kit effect. But what I can do is just send a Merly directly to my graveyard with that effect and then make a Kaleido Heart of my own Kaleido Heart Chainlink 1 to shuffle back the Sulliek, and my Planet Chainlink 2 to pop the Rhino. This removes a card from the field, and it gets me an additional fusion. So now I can make my own Kit Kalos. And from here, it's game. The grand finale will be my finals match versus Chris. This is game 1. I've lost a coin toss once again. Chris has opened Imperm, Agito, Mudora, Havnis, and DD Crow. I've opened up also Havnis, Mudora, and Agito, but 2 copies of Maxi. I choose to Maxi right away, as I do not want to play into talents, and I do have a play for next turn in the form of Mudora pitch Agito. Chris elects to just pass turn. I start my turn off with normal summon Rhinoheart. This plays around Maxi. It does not play around Havnis, but at the very least, I'm able to use my second copy of Maxi on this Havnis. And now I'm applying some pressure so that Chris does not want to commit too much to fusions. The Rhinoheart is also met with an Imperm, but I can always continue to extend with Mudora pitch Agito or with the instant fusion that I picked up. I'll be able to trigger Havnis, Scream, Sulliek, and Rhino. My Kit Kalos is met with a DD Crow, but at this point in time, I'll be ending the game anyway, and Kit Kalos did her job. That said, I can't allow my girl to stay in the banish zone. So I'm going to add Crime with the Scream, and then I'll send that Crime with Rhinoheart. This will allow me to put the kit back into my extra deck, and I can trigger the Agito to have 2 additional level 4 bodies. Dugaris makes that a quick game 1.